As almost everybody here realizes, 26 states challenged the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act in federal court. On June 28th, the United States Supreme Court announced its decision regarding the law. This morning, the Missouri Foundation for Health Director of Health Policy, Ryan Barker, is going to provide a brief overview of the court's decision, and then our panel of local experts is going to respond, and as I said, take your questions. Ryan joined the Missouri Foundation for Health in 2002. He assisted in the establishment and growth of the health policy area. During his tenure at MFH, Ryan has developed expertise on topics that include Missouri medical program, health disparities, federal health reform, and policy options to provide health insurance to the underinsured. Since 2010, Ryan and his team have held more than 160 educational meetings that explain the ACA through their Cover Missouri project. And I know that he's going to tell us a lot more about that. Ryan?
Good morning. So I'm pleased to see such a full auditorium this morning. And there are a few seats in the front if the people sitting along the edges would like to come down. So I'm going to jump right in because I think everybody would really like to hear from the panel and also ask questions of the panel. This is a very timely topic. The Cover Missouri Project and the Missouri Foundation for Health, one of our goals is really to provide fact-based, neutral information about a variety of health topics. And the health reform law has really been a focus of ours for the past 2 years. And we do these type of meetings, as Ellen said, we've done about 160 of them across the state. And if any of you would like us to come and speak to a group in your organization, we would be happy to do that. And please just contact us after today's presentation. I'm going to jump right in, and we're going to go over a little bit about the Supreme Court decision, what happened, and then I just have a couple slides on its impact and what this all means. So to start out, the Supreme Court really had to answer 4 questions. There were 4 main questions that the justices answered. The first one, was it too soon to make a ruling on the Affordable Care Act? There is something called the Anti-Injunction Act, and what that really means is that nobody can bring a case before the Supreme Court that has to do with a tax until someone has actually been taxed. So what did they rule on this? They actually ruled no, that this does not apply, the Anti-Injunction Act does not apply. Now, some of you may scratch your heads because they threaded the needle of this decision pretty closely. Why did they rule this? Because the ACA in the Affordable Care Act, it actually says that the individual mandate that requires people to have health insurance is a penalty. And because they actually use the word penalty, the Anti-Injunction Act does not apply. So, so next big question was constitutional authority for the individual mandate. Is there, in the Constitution, can Congress mandate that every American have health insurance? And the administration argued 3 different parts of the Constitution. The first one was the Commerce Clause. Does health insurance go interstate, across state boundaries? Is this an argument, this interstate commerce, for an individual mandate? And the answer to that one in the majority opinion was no. So since that was a no, the next part of the Constitution that they argued was the necessary and proper clause, that Congress has the authority to do what is necessary and proper to follow through with laws that they pass. Because the Commerce Clause was a no, the necessary and proper clause was a no. So if any of you were watching CNN, or I think also I know NPR locally had it wrong at first, but if any of you were listening and you heard the decision that they overturned the individual mandate, the reason that came out as the thing was overturned at first was because these first 2 things, the Commerce Clause and the necessary and proper clause, were a no, and the reporters just didn't read far enough. The third part of the Constitution, which nobody really expected that this was what was going to uphold the individual mandate, was the tax and spend clause. Congress has the authority to enact taxes and then spend those taxes in the way they see proper. This was a yes. So this is what upheld the individual mandate. Now, didn't I just say under the Anti-Injunction Act that this was a penalty? And they said, yes, they called it a penalty in the law, and that's why it doesn't, the Anti-Injunction Act doesn't apply, but this is a tax. And since it's a tax, we can uphold that the individual mandate it has authority under the Constitution. So the individual mandate was upheld. And I just quickly want to, what does that mean? What does the individual mandate mean for us? So starting in 2014, and I'm going to have to step to the side because I don't have this all memorized. Starting in 2014, all individuals in the United States must have qualifying coverage. Those without coverage pay a tax penalty. Notice I use both the words. Tax penalty of $695 or 2.5% of their household income, up to a maximum of 3 times that amount of $2,085. The penalty will be phased in. So starting in 2014, the maximum penalty is, or tax, is $95 or 1% of your taxable income. And then it goes up in 2015, it's $325 or 2% of your taxable income. And then in 2016, $695 or 2.5% of your taxable income. After 2016, it goes up according to inflation. Now, there are exemptions for the individual mandate. Those exemptions include religious objections. So there are some religious denominations in this country that do not believe in organized health insurance, and they will be exempt from the individual mandate. There also is a financial hardship, and part of this applies to if you are in between jobs or you lose your job and you're moving to a new job and you have up to a 3-month window of when you're uninsured between jobs. Now, there will be access to insurance in like a health insurance exchange, but you will not be penalized if you're uninsured between jobs for a limited amount of time. And then finally, the 8% rule. If you cannot find health insurance that costs less than 8% of your income, then you are exempt from the individual mandate. So back to the 4 main questions. What was the third question? It was severability. And it only needed to be answered if they found the individual mandate unconstitutional. So because they found the individual mandate constitutional, they didn't have to answer, if you get rid of the individual mandate, how much else do you have to get rid of in this law? Now, interestingly, I included this, so the answer was they didn't need to answer this because they ruled that it was constitutional. The interesting thing is the minority opinion in this case. It was a 5-4 decision. The minority answered this question, and their answer was to throw out the entire law, that it was not severable, that if you did not have the individual mandate, you had to get rid of the entire law. And actually, I have a slide later where I will talk about why there was some validity to that opinion, that if you throw out one part, the whole law sort of builds on each other. The final question, which was sort of the sleeper question that nobody was really thinking about, was the 26 states also challenged this expansion of Medicaid. In Missouri, we call Medicaid MoHealthNet. Every state runs its own separate Medicaid program, but it really is a federal-state partnership. So the state said, in the Affordable Care Act, it said that states will expand their Medicaid programs to some new populations, or they will lose all federal money for Medicaid, period. And the states argued that this was too much. It went too far, the penalty was too harsh, and the Supreme Court ruled, yes, you can expand Medicaid, and you can ask states to expand Medicaid, but that penalty, you can't force them to expand Medicaid, and the penalty was pretty much forcing states to expand Medicaid because it was unreasonable to expect them to give up all of their Medicaid money just because they didn't want to expand. So what that has left us with in this decision was a little bit more flexibility for the states, leaves the decision up to the states of whether to expand Medicaid, and that it is optional. So this will be a discussion moving forward. So I wanted to, in the exchange, so I wanted to first show you this slide because this builds on that last question of Medicaid. So this is the health insurance exchange and how much people have to pay out of pocket in these new exchanges. And Missouri can either set up its own health insurance exchange or the federal government will set one up for us. So say you're an individual or a family, you go into this insurance marketplace to purchase insurance, there's actually subsidies to help you purchase insurance. And you can see they start out at about 100% of poverty. So at that level, people are paying 2% of their income towards their health insurance, and the federal government provides subsidies to pay the difference. Now how much you are responsible for goes up as your income goes up. So you can see as you go up to like 200% of poverty, you're a little over 4% of your income, all the way up to about 400% of poverty, where you are responsible for 9.5% of your income for health insurance. And if the insurance costs more than that, the federal government will provide a subsidy. Those subsidies end at 400% of poverty. Now, why did I just throw in this slide about the exchanges? And really this gets back to that minority opinion that said if we don't have the individual mandate, we have to throw the whole law out. What was part of their justification was this exact slide. So I just showed you that in the exchange there are these subsidies. And you'll notice that those subsidies went down to 100% of poverty. The Medicaid expansion really affects two populations in Missouri: parents and childless adults. So in Missouri, our current Medicaid eligibility for parents is about 18% of poverty. For a single mom with 2 kids, that's about $3,500 a year. So she would have to make less than that to be Medicaid eligible. And for childless adults, there is no Medicaid eligibility right now. So the yellow is under the Affordable Care Act, what would the expansion population in Medicaid look like? And you can see it goes up to 133% of poverty. Those exchange subsidies come down to 100% of poverty. So there is some overlap. So why is this important? So Missouri now has a decision to make around Medicaid. Do we expand Medicaid? Do we not? But you can see if we decide not to expand Medicaid, it removes that yellow box. And what happens is we now have a group of people who are not eligible for subsidies in the exchange because the ACA assumed they would have Medicaid coverage. So what it does for that population under 100% of poverty is leave a gap. It leaves a hole where those individuals will most likely remain uninsured. Now, why should you as the business community care about this? One, I would say there's some ethical and moral reasons, but I won't go into that. What I will say is right now the way hospitals and safety net providers work is that there is something called DSH funds, disproportionate share hospital funding, and it goes to hospitals to help them pay for caring for the uninsured. Part of the way the ACA is paid for is that there is reductions in the amount of DSH funds starting in 2014. So hospitals will no longer be receiving anywhere near the amount. I mean, we're talking about billions of dollars in cuts to DSH funds across the nation. So hospitals will not be receiving as many DSH funds, but if we don't have Medicaid expansion, they're still going to see a large number of uninsured walk through their doors. What does that mean for the hospitals? They have to pay for that care. They can't deny care for people who are uninsured. If you walk into an emergency room, you have to be treated. How do they make up for this? They have to make up some of the revenue, some of the way of paying for this care. They cannot negotiate prices with Medicare. They cannot negotiate prices with Medicaid. The only people that hospitals can negotiate prices with are private insurers. In order to make up for the lack of this Medicaid expansion and the reduction in DSH funds, there will be increases in private insurance because that's the only way hospitals will be able to make up the difference. Now that I've scared you, I am going to kick it to the panel. I think hopefully I will get a good reaction out of the panel after that. This is the Cover Missouri website. We are on Twitter and Facebook, and you can sign up for Cover Missouri e-bulletins. They come out maybe twice a month. You can also contact us if you're interested in having us come speak to your organization.